The iron shackles bit into her wrists as Willa Emerson stood trembling on the raised platform, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might tear through her ribcage. The auction house reeked of fear and expensive cologne, a sickening combination that made her stomach clench, as faceless voices shouted numbers that represented the remainder of her life. She'd heard the stories, whispered in the human districts about what happened to those sold to vampires, but she'd never imagined she'd become one of those cautionary tales herself. The auctioneer's voice droned on, extolling her virtues as if she were livestock, which in this world she supposed she was. 23 years old, university-educated, healthy blood work, no hereditary diseases. The words washed over her as she stared at the crowd of pale faces below, their crimson eyes gleaming in the chandelier light of the ornate ballroom that served as tonight's marketplace. Her legs threatened to give out, and only her grip on the last shreds of her pride kept her upright. Then the room went silent. Willa felt the shift in the atmosphere before she understood what caused it. Every vampire in the auction house had gone perfectly still, their attention snapping toward the massive doors at the entrance. They swung open without a sound, and a figure stepped through that made every other creature in the room seem like a pale imitation of what a vampire should be. He was impossibly tall, his frame wrapped in a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. White hair fell past his shoulders in a cascade of silver, framing a face that was both beautiful and terrifying in its perfection. His skin was pale as moonlight, and when his eyes swept the room, they burned with an ancient crimson fire that made Willa's breath catch in her throat. Power radiated from him in waves so potent she could feel it pressing against her skin even from across the expansive space. The auctioneer's voice had died mid-sentence. Every vampire in the room had either bowed their heads or dropped to one knee, a gesture of respect so profound that Willa understood with sudden terrifying clarity exactly who had just entered. The Vampire King. She'd heard his name whispered in the same breath as legends and nightmares. Roran Kervaine, the oldest vampire in existence, the first of his kind, the immortal who'd ruled their people for over 3,000 years. He was supposed to be a myth, a story told to keep both humans and vampires in line. Yet here he stood, undeniably real, and his gaze had locked onto her with an intensity that made her knees finally buckle. Before she could hit the platform, he was there. Willa hadn't even seen him move. One moment he'd been at the entrance, the next his hands were on her waist, lifting her down from the auction block in one fluid motion as if she weighed nothing at all. His touch burned through the thin fabric of her dress, each finger placement precise and strangely gentle despite the obvious strength coiled in his frame. "This auction is over," his voice rumbled through the space, deep and commanding, carrying an accent she couldn't quite place, but that spoke of centuries long past. "Anyone who objects may voice their complaint now." The silence that followed was absolute. Willa found herself cradled against his chest, her face pressed to the silk of his shirt, and she could hear nothing. No heartbeat, no breath, just an otherworldly stillness that reminded her viscerally that the being holding her was not and had never been human. She should have been terrified. Instead, something about his presence made her feel safer than she had in months, since the night the human protection laws had been revoked and her entire world had crumbled. "I will pay triple the highest bid to the auction house for their trouble," Roran continued, his words brooking no argument. "Send the invoice to the palace." Palace. Of course he had a palace. He moved toward the exit, carrying her as if she were something precious rather than purchased, and the crowd parted like water before him. Willa caught glimpses of shocked vampire faces, their expressions ranging from awe to barely concealed envy. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, to understand what was happening, but her voice had abandoned her entirely. The night air hit her face as they exited the building, and she gasped at the sudden temperature change. Roran looked down at her then, really looked at her, and she found herself drowning in those ancient crimson eyes. "You're safe now," he said quietly, and something in his tone made her believe him despite the impossibility of the situation. "I give you my word." A sleek black car waited at the curb, the door already open. Roran settled her into the leather interior with care before sliding in beside her, the door closing with a soft click that felt far too final. The driver, another vampire with the same pale features and crimson eyes, pulled away from the curb without needing instructions. Willa finally found her voice. Why? It was barely a whisper, but she knew he'd heard. His head turned toward her, and she saw something flicker across his perfect features. Confusion, perhaps, or recognition. Something that suggested he didn't entirely understand his own actions. I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty in his words surprised her. I came to the auction on business to investigate reports of illegal blood trading. Then I saw you standing there, shaking like a leaf in a storm, and something in me. He paused, his jaw tightening. I couldn't let them have you, any of them. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, it sent a strange warmth through her chest that she absolutely did not want to examine too closely. She was in shock, she told herself. That was all. Her mind was simply grasping at anything that resembled safety after months of fear. What happens now? She asked, wrapping her arms around herself. You bought me. Do I belong to you? The word belong seemed to pain him. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the city lights streaming past the window. The law says yes, but I'm not in the habit of owning people, Miss Emerson. Willa Emerson. She studied his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hair caught the passing streetlights. And you're Roran Kervaine, the vampire king. Just Roran, please. There was a weariness in his voice that spoke of the weight of centuries. I have enough people bowing and scraping without you adding to it. I'm not sure protocol covers the proper way to address someone who just bought you at auction, Willa said, and was surprised to hear a hint of her old spirit creeping into her words. Her mother would have been proud. The thought of her mother, of what had happened 3 months ago, threatened to break her composure, and she shoved it down ruthlessly. A sound that might have been a laugh escaped Roran. Fair point. He turned back to her, and his expression had softened slightly. I will offer you a choice, Willa Emerson. You may stay in my home under my protection, with your freedom intact, or I can arrange for you to be relocated to one of the few remaining human settlements, with enough money to start a new life. The choice is entirely yours. She stared at him, searching for the trick, the catch, the hidden price. And what would you want in return? If I stayed? His eyes held hers, and she saw something in their depths that made her breath catch. I don't know yet, he said softly. Perhaps simply the pleasure of your company. It's been a very long time since someone looked at me as anything other than a king or a monster. The car pulled through gates that looked like they belonged to a museum, and Willa caught her first glimpse of Roran's home. It was indeed a palace, or at least what remained of one, incorporated impossibly into the heart of the modern city. Gothic spires rose toward the night sky, gargoyles perched on stone corners, but electric lights glowed in the windows, and the architecture blended old-world craftsmanship with contemporary design in a way that was both beautiful and disorienting. I need time to think, Willa said as the car stopped. Of course. Roran exited first, then offered his hand to help her out. His touch was cool, but not unpleasant, and she found herself noticing details she shouldn't be noticing. The way his fingers curled carefully around hers, mindful of his strength. The small gesture of placing himself between her and the night, as if protecting her from threats she couldn't see. I'll have rooms prepared for you. My staff will provide anything you need. The interior of the palace was even more breathtaking than the exterior. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Priceless artwork adorned the walls, and a grand staircase curved upward into shadows. But Willa barely processed any of it, her mind still reeling from the evening's events. A woman appeared, as if summoned, tall and elegant with the signature white hair and pale skin of a vampire, though her eyes were a softer amber rather than crimson. Your Majesty. Celine, this is Willa Emerson. She'll be staying with us. Please prepare the rose suite and ensure she has everything she requires. Roran's tone was gentle but firm. And make it clear to all staff that she is a guest, not a servant. She is under my direct protection. Celine's amber eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of her surprise before she bowed her head. Of course, Your Majesty. Miss Emerson, if you'll follow me. Willa glanced back at Roran, suddenly unwilling to leave his presence despite having known him for less than an hour. He met her gaze, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection she couldn't name but could feel thrumming in her bones. "Rest tonight," he said quietly. "We'll talk more tomorrow. You're safe here, Willa, I promise you that." She nodded and followed Celine up the grand staircase, acutely aware of Roran's eyes on her until she disappeared from view. The Rose Suite was aptly named, decorated in soft pinks and creams with an enormous four-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Celine showed her the attached bathroom, complete with a tub that could fit 3 people and a wardrobe already stocked with clothing in her size. "How did you know my size?" Willa asked, fingering a silk nightgown. "We didn't," Celine admitted. "His Majesty called ahead while you were in the car. We estimated and will adjust anything that doesn't fit." She paused at the door. "If I may speak freely, Miss Emerson?" "Please." "I've served His Majesty for 200 years. I've never seen him act as he did tonight." Selena's expression was carefully neutral. "Whatever brought you into his life, I suspect it will change many things for both of you." With that cryptic statement, she left, and Willa was finally alone. She sank onto the bed, her legs giving out at last, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. Terror, confusion, exhaustion, and underneath it all, a tiny, treacherous spark of hope. She'd been so certain her life was over when the police had come, when she'd been processed and registered and dragged to that auction block like an animal. The vampire laws had been harsh but fair once. Then something had shifted in the political landscape, and suddenly humans had gone from protected citizens to potential property overnight. Willa's mother had died, trying to get them both to a human settlement. The memory of her final words, urging Willa to run while she held off their pursuers, was a wound that hadn't even begun to heal. She'd been caught 3 days later, alone and starving, and processed into the system that fed humans to vampires who wanted live-in blood sources or servants, or worse. But Roran had said she was safe, that she had a choice. Could she believe him? Could she trust a vampire, even a king? Sleep claimed her before she could answer her own questions, exhaustion finally winning out over anxiety. She woke to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains and the smell of fresh coffee. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then, the previous night came rushing back. She sat up to find a breakfast tray on the bedside table and a note in elegant script. "Good morning, Willa. Please eat and rest as much as you need. When you're ready, I'd like to show you the palace gardens. They're walled and protected from the sun's reach in certain areas, so we can walk together. Only if you wish to, of course. R." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. She ate the breakfast, finding it perfectly prepared to her tastes, though she'd never expressed them, and took a long bath in the massive tub. The wardrobe yielded a simple but beautiful dress in deep green, and she found shoes that fit perfectly on a rack she'd missed the night before. When she finally emerged from her suite, she found Celine waiting in the hallway. "His Majesty is in the library," the vampire woman said with a slight smile. "I can take you to him, or to the gardens, or anywhere else you'd like to go. The palace is yours to explore." "The library, please." Celine led her through corridors lined with history, past rooms that glimpsed into different eras of design and decoration. The library, when they reached it, was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stuffed with books, rolling ladders, comfortable reading nooks, and windows that had been fitted with what looked like specialized glass that filtered out harmful UV rays while still letting in light. Roran sat in a leather chair near the window, a book in his hands, and Willa's breath caught at the sight of him. In the daylight filtering through the treated glass, he was even more striking. His white hair gleamed like spun silver, and his features were so perfect they seemed carved by a master sculptor. He wore simpler clothes today, black pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscled for someone who looked so refined. He looked up as she entered, and his face transformed with a smile that was both gentle and devastating. "You came. You left an invitation." Willa moved into the room, her fingers trailing over the spines of nearby books. "This library is incredible. Books are one of the few pleasures that never grow old, even after 3,000 years. Roran set his book aside and stood, moving with that fluid grace that marked him as profoundly inhuman. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months, honestly." She met his gaze. "Thank you. For the room, the clothes, the kindness, I still don't understand why you're doing this. Would you believe me if I said I'm still trying to understand it myself?" He moved closer, but stopped a respectful distance away. "When I saw you on that platform, something in me recognized something in you. I've lived a very long time, Willa, long enough to learn to trust my instincts when they speak this clearly." "And what are your instincts telling you?" His crimson eyes held hers with an intensity that sent heat through her veins. "That you're important, that you're meant to be here, that letting any other vampire take you would have been—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "Unacceptable." The possessiveness was back, and this time Willa felt an answering pull in her own chest. This was crazy. She'd known him for barely 12 hours. She should be planning her escape, taking him up on his offer to relocate to a human settlement. Instead, she found herself wanting to move closer, to understand the connection that hummed between them like a living thing. "Show me the gardens?" she asked softly. His smile could have lit the entire palace. "It would be my honor." The gardens were spectacular, a hidden oasis in the heart of the city. Ancient trees provided canopy cover that allowed Roran to walk beside her without discomfort, and flowers bloomed in riot of colors that seemed impossible for late autumn. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, and Willa found herself relaxing in his presence in a way she wouldn't have thought possible. "Tell me about yourself," Roran said eventually. "Not the facts that were listed at the auction, the real things. What did you love before the world changed?" Willa was quiet for a moment, grief rising up. "I was studying art history. I wanted to work in museum curation, helping preserve humanity's cultural heritage," she laughed bitterly. "Ironic, given that I ended up being sold like an artifact myself. That won't happen again." The steel in his voice left no room for doubt. "I've already begun drafting new laws to abolish the trade entirely. It should never have been allowed in the first place." She stopped walking, staring at him. "You can do that. I'm the king. I can do whatever I wish within the bounds of our governance structure." He looked troubled. "I've been too hands-off in recent centuries, letting regional lords manage their territories with minimal oversight. That ends now. What happened to you? What's been happening to humans since the Protection Acts were revoked? It's unconscionable." Why were they revoked? Willa had wondered, but never gotten a straight answer. Humans and vampires coexisted peacefully for decades under those laws. Roran's expression darkened. "Politics? There's a faction among my kind who believe vampires should rule absolutely, that humans exist solely to serve our needs. They gained enough support in the council to push through the revocation while I was dealing with a territorial dispute in Europe." His hands clenched into fists. "By the time I returned and understood what had happened, the damage was done. I've been working to reverse it, but change comes slowly, even for a king. Yet you can abolish the auctions? I should have months ago. I didn't realize how bad they'd become, how dehumanizing." He looked at her with something like pain in his ancient eyes. "Seeing you there, seeing what they'd reduced you to, it made the reality impossible to ignore. For that wake-up call I'm grateful, though I wish you hadn't had to suffer for me to receive it." They'd reached a fountain at the center of the garden, water cascading from a statue of a woman with wings. Willa sat on the stone edge, and Roran settled beside her, maintaining that careful distance that spoke of his awareness of his own strength and her fragility. "Can I ask you something personal?" Willa ventured. "Anything. In 3,000 years, have you never found someone? A partner? A companion?" She couldn't bring herself to say love, but the word hung between them anyway. Roran was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with memory. "Once, a very long time ago, when I was still young by vampire standards, her name was Alara, and she was human." He stared at the fountain. "We had 30 years together before age took her. I held her hand as she died, and I swore I would never put myself through that pain again." "I'm sorry," Willa whispered, her heart aching for him. "It was 2,000 years ago. The grief has faded to a distant memory." He turned to look at her. "Or it had, until last night. Until I saw you and felt something I thought long dead stir back to life." Willa's breath caught. "Roran, I'm not asking anything of you," he said quickly. "I'm simply being honest. You asked what my instincts were telling me. They're telling me that you could be someone important in my life if you chose to be. But the choice is always yours, Willa. I meant what I said about your freedom. She should have been terrified. This was too much, too fast, with someone too powerful and too dangerous. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw loneliness that matched her own, a soul that had weathered millennia and somehow still maintained the capacity for gentleness. "I'd like to stay," she heard herself say, "at least for a while, to see what this is between us." The joy that lit his face was breathtaking. "You have no idea how happy that makes me." They talked for hours in that garden, about everything and nothing. Roran told her about the world he'd seen change over his long life, about the rise and fall of empires, about art and music and literature spanning millennia. Willa found herself opening up about her life before, about her mother, about the dreams she'd had to abandon when the world shifted beneath her feet. The sun was setting when they finally headed back inside, and Willa realized she'd spent the entire day with him without once feeling afraid. Somehow, impossibly, she felt like she'd known him forever. Over the following days, a routine developed. Roran worked during the evenings when his government demanded his attention, meeting with advisors and regional lords, drafting new legislation, and dealing with the endless bureaucracy of ruling an immortal race. But he kept his days for Willa, showing her the palace, sharing his private collection of artwork, teaching her about vampire culture and history. They were in the portrait gallery when she finally asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why do all vampires look the way you do? The white hair, pale skin, red eyes. Is it part of the transformation?" "It is." Roran stood before a painting of himself from centuries past, looking almost identical to how he appeared now. When a human is turned, the change remakes them at a fundamental level. The hair loses its pigment, the skin pales, and the eyes change to reflect the blood that now sustains us. It's a mark of what we are, impossible to hide or disguise. "Do you wish you could hide it?" Willa asked softly. He considered this. "Sometimes, it would make moving through the human world easier. But mostly, no. This is what I am. I've had 3,000 years to make peace with it." He turned to her. "Does it bother you, the way we look?" "No," she said honestly. "It's striking, beautiful in an otherworldly way." She blushed as soon as the words left her mouth, but Roran's expression softened. "You're beautiful too," he said quietly. "Your brown hair that catches the light like burnished wood. Your green eyes that show every emotion. The warmth in your skin, the blood flowing beneath it." He caught himself. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." "It's fine." Willa moved closer to him, drawn by something she couldn't name. "Can I ask another question? About blood?" "Of course. Do you want a drink from me?" Her heart pounded as she asked, but she needed to know. "Is that why you really bought me?" Roran's jaw tightened. "I won't lie to you, Willa. You smell incredible to me. All humans do to vampires, but you especially. It's like wine and honey and summer storms all mixed together." He closed his eyes briefly. "But I would never take from you without your permission. I have access to donated blood supplies. I don't need to feed from living humans." "But you want to," she pressed. "Wanting and acting on desire are different things." His eyes opened, burning crimson. "Yes, part of me wants to know what you taste like, wants to feel your pulse against my lips. But a greater part of me wants to keep you safe, including from myself. So I won't ask, Willa, not ever." The restraint in his voice, the iron control, made something hot unfurl in Willa's stomach. She was playing with fire, she knew, but she couldn't seem to stop herself from leaning into the flames. "What if I offered?" His control cracked visibly. "Don't, please. You don't understand what you're saying." "Then explain it to me." Roran turned away, his hands gripping the edge of a nearby pedestal. "Feeding from a living human is intimate, more intimate than almost any other act between vampire and human. It creates a bond, a connection. The vampire feels the human's emotions, their essence. And for the human, if done correctly, it's intensely pleasurable." He looked back at her. "I've lived long enough to know what's growing between us, Willa. Adding that element before we've even had time to explore it properly would be rushing something that should be savored." She understood then. He wasn't refusing because he didn't want her. He was refusing because he wanted her too much, and he was trying to do this right. The realization made her heart swell with something dangerous, something she wasn't ready to name yet. "Okay," she said softly. "I understand, and I'm sorry for pushing." "You never have to apologize for asking questions." He moved back to her side, and this time he let himself reach out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with infinite gentleness. His cool fingers lingered against her cheek. "I want you to feel safe with me, Willa. To know that you can ask me anything, challenge me, push back when you disagree. I don't want you here as some silent, frightened ornament. I want you as yourself, fully and completely." "I'm starting to believe that," she admitted, leaning into his touch without thinking. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities, until a discreet cough from the doorway shattered it. Selene stood there, looking apologetic. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty, but Lord Draven has arrived for his appointment. He's waiting in your study." Roran's expression clouded. "Of course. Thank you, Selene." He turned back to Willa. "I'm sorry, I have to take this meeting. It's about the new legislation." "Go," Willa assured him. "I'll be fine. I might explore the library more." "I'll find you when I'm finished." He hesitated, then lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a cool kiss to her knuckles that sent shivers racing up her arm. "Until then." Willa watched him go, her hand still tingling from his kiss, her mind spinning. She was falling for him. Despite the impossibility of it, despite every logical reason she should be terrified, she was falling for a 3,000-year-old vampire king, and she had no idea what to do about it. She made her way to the library as planned, but found herself too restless to read. Instead, she wandered to the windows, looking out over the city that had become so hostile to her kind. Somewhere out there, other humans were suffering the fate she'd narrowly escaped. The thought made her feel guilty for her current comfort, for the safety of Roran's protection. "You care for them," a voice said from behind her, making her jump. She spun to find another vampire standing in the library, one she hadn't met before. He was tall, like all vampires seemed to be, with the signature white hair and pale skin, but his crimson eyes held a coldness that Roran's lacked. He wore expensive clothing that screamed old money and older power. "Who are you?" Willa asked, her heart racing. "Lord Draven Voss. I had my meeting with the king and thought I'd introduce myself to his newest acquisition." The way he said the last word made her skin crawl. "You're the human from the auction, the one he made such a scene over." "I'm Willa Emerson," she said firmly, drawing herself up. "And I'm not an acquisition. I'm a guest." Draven laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Is that what he told you? How charming." He moved closer, and Willa fought the urge to back away. "Let me give you some advice, little human. Our king has a weakness for pretty things. He collects them, treasures them for a while, then loses interest when something new catches his eye. Don't mistake temporary fascination for something more." "Roran isn't like that," Willa said, but doubt crept into her voice. "Isn't he? Do you really think you're special? That a being who has lived for 3,000 years could actually care about one insignificant human?" Draven's smile was cruel. "He'll grow bored of you eventually, and when he does, the protection you're enjoying will evaporate. I'd suggest you take whatever money he's offered you and disappear while you can." "That's enough, Draven." Roran's voice cut through the library like a blade. He stood in the doorway, and the fury on his face was terrible to behold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and Willa felt power rolling off him in waves that made her hair stand on end. "Your Majesty," Draven said smoothly, bowing, "I was simply introducing myself to your guest. You were attempting to frighten her and undermine my authority." Roran moved into the room, placing himself between Willa and the other vampire. "You forget yourself, Draven. Guest privileges extended, meeting concluded. Your presence is no longer required in my home." "Of course." Draven's eyes flickered with something dark. "But the council should know about your latest indulgence. They'll have questions about why their king is prioritizing one human over the needs of our people." "The council can bring their questions to me directly." Roran's voice was deadly quiet. "Now leave, before I have you removed." Draven left with another mocking bow, and the moment the door closed behind him, Roran's anger dissolved. He turned to Willa, his expression shifting to concern. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "No, I'm fine." But her hands were shaking and she couldn't quite catch her breath. "Is he right?" Are you going to get bored of me? Willa, no. Roran closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with exquisite gentleness. He's a poisonous snake who disagrees with my policies and will say anything to cause discord. I'm not going to get bored of you. If anything, I find myself more fascinated with each passing day. But 3,000 years, she whispered. How can I compete with that? How can I be anything but insignificant next to everything you've experienced? You want to know what 3,000 years has taught me? His thumbs brushed her cheeks, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. That true connection is rare, that most of those years were spent going through motions, fulfilling duties, existing but not truly living. Then I saw you, and I felt awake for the first time in centuries. His forehead rested against hers. You're not insignificant, Willa. You're extraordinary, and I'm terrified of how quickly you've become essential to me. Roran, she breathed, her hands coming up to grip his wrists, anchoring herself to him. I'm falling in love with you, he said softly. I know it's too soon, I know it's complicated, but I'm 3,000 years old, and I know what I feel. I'm falling in love with your curiosity, your strength, the way you challenge me and make me want to be better. I'm falling in love with every moment we spend together, and I need you to know that so you can tell me if I should stop. If this is one-sided, if I'm making you uncomfortable, tell me now and I'll step back. I'll still protect you, still give you everything I promised, but I'll keep my distance. Willa looked up into those ancient crimson eyes and saw vulnerability there, real and raw and heartbreaking. This impossibly powerful being was laying his heart at her feet, giving her the power to shatter it and trusting her not to. Don't step back, she whispered, because I think I'm falling in love with you too, and it's terrifying, but also the most real thing I've felt since my world fell apart. The kiss that followed was inevitable, gentle and sweet and electric all at once. His lips were cool against hers, his restraint evident in every careful movement, as if he were handling something infinitely precious. Willa melted into him, her fingers threading through his silver hair, and felt something slot into place in her chest, a sense of rightness that defied all logic. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, or at least she was, Roran rested his forehead against hers again. I will protect you, he murmured, from Draven, from anyone who would harm you. You're mine now, if you'll have me, and I protect what's mine. I'm yours, Willa agreed, the words feeling like a vow. And you're mine. His smile was radiant. Yours. For however long you want me. The following weeks passed in a blur of happiness that Willa had thought impossible. Roran courted her properly, with a chivalry that belonged to another era but charmed her completely. He brought her gifts, first editions of books she'd mentioned loving, artwork for the walls of her suite, jewelry that looked like it belonged in museums. But more than the material things, he gave her his time and attention, treating her as an intellectual equal and a romantic partner all at once. They spent evenings in the library, Roran handling his kingly duties while Willa read or worked on cataloging his art collection, a project she'd taken on with his enthusiastic blessing. They walked in the gardens every day, talking about everything under the sun. He introduced her to members of his inner circle who weren't venomous snakes like Draven, vampires who treated her with respect because their king demanded it and because she earned it through her own merit. And there were kisses, stolen moments of passion that grew steadily less restrained as they became more comfortable with each other. Roran's control was remarkable, always pulling back before things went too far, always mindful of his strength and her humanity. It was both frustrating and endearing, and Willa found herself falling deeper with each passing day. The new legislation passed the council 3 weeks after she'd moved into the palace. The auctions were abolished, existing contracts reviewed for signs of coercion or abuse, and the Protection Acts reinstated with even stronger provisions. Roran worked tirelessly to implement the changes, and Willa watched him become more animated, more purposeful, as if her presence had reminded him why he'd taken the throne in the first place. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Willa was in the art gallery, making notes on a series of Renaissance paintings when she felt eyes on her. She looked up to find 3 vampires she didn't recognize watching her from the doorway. Something about their posture, the way they spread out to block her exit, made alarm bells ring in her head. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're the human," the one in the center said. His crimson eyes were cold, calculating. The king's pet. I'm Willa Emerson, and you're trespassing in a private wing of the palace. She straightened her spine, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. I suggest you leave before security arrives. Security answers to us? Another one said with a cruel smile. We're members of the council, girl. We go where we please. What do you want? Willa's hand moved slowly toward the panic button Roran had insisted she carry, a small device that would summon guards immediately. To deliver a message. The first vampire moved into the room, his movements predatory. The king has become distracted, weak. He's allowing a human to influence policy, to undermine centuries of vampire supremacy. This cannot stand. Roran makes his own decisions, Willa said firmly, her finger finding the button. I have no power over him. Don't you? The vampire was suddenly in front of her, having moved faster than her eyes could track. His hand closed around her wrist before she could press the button, his grip bruising. You've bewitched him somehow, made him forget what he is. We're here to break that spell. Let her go. Roran's voice came from behind them, and the fury in it made even the council members freeze. Now! The vampire holding Willa released her instantly, stepping back. Roran strode into the gallery, flanked by guards, and the rage on his face was terrifying. His eyes blazed like hellfire, and power crackled in the air around him so intensely that Willa felt her hair lift with static. You dare, he said softly, each word dropping like stones. You dare to enter my home, threaten my chosen, and claim to act in my interest? Your Majesty, the lead vampire said, but his voice wavered. We're simply concerned. Concerned? Roran's laugh was devoid of humor. You're concerned that I'm finally doing the job I've neglected for too long, that I'm actually leading instead of letting corrupt lords like you run roughshod over the innocent. He moved to Willa's side, his arm sliding protectively around her waist. This woman has done more to remind me of my purpose in 3 weeks than any of you have in 3 centuries. She's making you weak, another council member spat. The others talk about it, how you spend all your time with her, how you're changing laws to appease human interests. I'm changing laws to correct injustices. If that makes me weak in your eyes, then I'm proud to be weak. Roran pulled Willa closer. And understand this, she is under my protection absolutely. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Any attempt to harm her will be met with the full force of my authority and my personal wrath. Are we clear? The vampires bowed, but Willa could see the hatred in their eyes. They left under the guard's supervision, and the moment they were gone, Roran turned to her, his hands running over her arms, checking for injuries. Did they hurt you? Your wrist, let me see. I'm fine, Willa assured him, though her wrist was already bruising. Just scared. I'm so sorry. He pressed a gentle kiss to the bruised skin. I should have anticipated this. Draven must have stirred up dissent in the council. I'll deal with it, I promise. They think I'm manipulating you. Willa's voice shook. Maybe they're right to be concerned. Maybe I am distracting you. Stop. Roran cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're not a distraction. You're my inspiration, my reason for caring again. Those vampires represent old ways of thinking, the belief that power means domination, and that humans exist solely to serve. I've been complicit in that through my inaction, but no more. With you at my side, I remember what leadership should look like, what justice should mean. I don't want to be the cause of conflict in your government, Willa whispered. You're not the cause. You're the catalyst for necessary change. He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips with aching tenderness. I love you, Willa Emerson. Having you here has made me remember what I'm living for, not just existing through. Don't let them take that away from us. I love you too, she said, and meant it with her whole heart. But I'm worried. What if they try something else? What if they hurt you to get to me? Roran actually smiled at that. Darling, I'm 3,000 years old and the most powerful vampire in existence. They can't hurt me. But your concern is noted and appreciated. He kissed her again, deeper this time. I'm going to call an emergency council session tonight. It's time to remind certain members exactly who they answer to. Will you be all right here for a few hours? I'll be fine. Celine's teaching me chess in the library. Good. I'll have extra guards posted. He held her for a moment longer, as if reluctant to let go. This will be resolved tonight, one way or another, I promise. The council session lasted hours. Willa tried to focus on chess with Celine, but her mind kept wandering to what was happening in the council chambers. Finally, near midnight, Roran returned, looking exhausted but satisfied. It's done, he said, sinking into the chair beside her. 3 council members have been removed from their positions for corruption and abuse of power, including the ones who threatened you. Draven has been censured and his territory reduced. The rest have been reminded in no uncertain terms that my word is law and my protection of you is absolute. Will that be enough? Celine asked quietly. It will have to be. Roran took Willa's hand, threading their fingers together. I've also made an announcement that will likely cause more ripples. I'm taking a consort. Willa's heart stopped. What? He turned to her, his expression soft. In vampire society, a consort is more than a companion. It's a formal position of power and respect, second only to the throne itself. By naming you my consort, I'm making it clear that you're not some temporary fancy, but a permanent part of my life and government. He hesitated. If you'll accept, that is. I should have asked first, but the council forced my hand. If you're not ready. I accept, Willa said quickly. I absolutely accept. His smile was brilliant. Then you'll need to be formally presented to the vampire court. There will be a ceremony, other rituals. It's a lot to take on. I can handle it, Willa squeezed his hand, as long as I have you. Always, he promised. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Willa worked with a team of advisors to understand vampire protocol, the responsibilities of a consort, the political landscape she was entering. It was overwhelming but exhilarating, and Roran was at her side every step of the way, patient and encouraging. The formal presentation was scheduled for a month after the council session, giving time for the news to spread and for vampires from across the world to travel to the palace. Willa was fitted for gowns that looked like something from a fantasy, jewelry that cost more than her parents' house, and taught the intricate dances of vampire court. But more important than all the pomp was what happened in the quiet moments between the preparations. Roran courted her with a dedication that made her heart swell, learning everything about her, sharing everything about himself. They talked about the future, about what her life as consort would look like, about whether she wanted to be turned someday. That conversation happened late one night in his private quarters, where she'd been spending more and more of her time. They lay together on his massive bed, fully clothed but wrapped in each other's arms, and Willa finally voiced the question that had been haunting her. Will you want me to become a vampire eventually? Roran was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. I won't lie and say I haven't thought about it. The idea of having eternity with you is intoxicating. He pulled back to look at her. But transformation is permanent and irreversible. It changes everything about what you are. I would never ask that of you unless you wanted it for yourself. But you'll stay young forever, and I'll grow old. Willa's voice was small. Eventually, you'll be caring for an elderly woman while you still look like this. And I would do so gladly, counting every day as a gift. His hand cupped her cheek. Willa, I had 30 years with Alara, and they were worth the pain of losing her. If I get 30 years with you, or 50, or however many your natural life allows, I'll treasure every single one. I'm not with you because I expect forever. I'm with you because you make my existence meaningful right now. Tears pricked her eyes. You really mean that? I really do. He kissed her softly. If you ever want to be turned, we can discuss it. But please don't feel pressured. I love you exactly as you are, heartbeat and all. The night of the formal presentation arrived too quickly. Willa stood in her suite staring at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back. The gown was a masterpiece of deep sapphire silk that brought out her eyes, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. Her hair had been styled in an elegant updo, and the jewelry Roran had given her, a necklace, and earrings of white gold and sapphires completed the look. You look like a queen, Celine said approvingly from the doorway. I don't feel like one. I feel like I'm about to face a firing squad. Willa's hands shook as she adjusted the necklace. The court can be intimidating, but remember, His Majesty chose you. That gives you power and status that most vampires would kill for. Celine moved to her side. And between you and me, you're the best thing that's happened to him in my entire 200 years of service. The court will see that eventually. A knock at the door preceded Roran's entrance, and Willa's breath caught. He wore formal court attire, all in black, his white hair loose around his shoulders, and he looked every inch the ancient, powerful king he was. But when his eyes found her, they softened with love that made her feel like the only person in the world. "You're stunning," he breathed, crossing to her. "Willa, you're absolutely breathtaking." "So are you," she managed. He offered his arm. "Ready to face the court?" "As long as you're with me. Always." The throne room had been transformed for the occasion. Hundreds of vampires filled the space, all with the signature white hair and pale skin that marked their kind, all with crimson eyes that tracked her movement as Roran led her down the center aisle. The weight of their attention was crushing, but Willa kept her head high, her hand steady on Roran's arm. He led her to the raised dais where two thrones sat, one significantly larger than the other. Roran took his seat on the king's throne, and Willa stood beside him, her heart pounding as silence fell over the assembly. "My people," Roran's voice carried through the vast space with preternatural clarity. "Tonight I formally present to you Willa Emerson, who has accepted the position of my consort. By our laws and traditions, she is to be afforded all the respect and protection of my own person. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any threat to her will be dealt with as treason against the crown." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Roran continued. "Some of you have questioned my judgment in this. You wonder why your king would choose a human as consort, why I would elevate her to such a position of power." His hand found Willa's, gripping it firmly. "I choose her because she reminds me what it means to lead with compassion as well as strength, because she challenges me to be better, to care again after centuries of apathy, because in a handful of weeks she has made me remember why I took this throne in the first place, to protect all beings under my rule, not just our own kind." He stood, pulling Willa forward to stand beside him in front of the thrones. "Willa Emerson has my heart, my loyalty, and my eternal protection. I expect all of you to honor that, or answer to me personally. Is that understood?" The response was a chorus of, "Yes, Your Majesty," though Willa could see hostility in some faces, but there was also curiosity in others, and what might have been respect in a few. It was a start. The ceremony proceeded with formal vows, Roran pledging to honor and protect her, Willa pledging to support and counsel him. Rings were exchanged, beautiful bands of white gold that bound them together in the eyes of vampire society. And then Roran kissed her in front of the entire court, a claiming and a declaration all at once. The celebration that followed was overwhelming. Vampires approached to offer congratulations, or simply to get a closer look at the human who'd captured their king's heart. Willa smiled and made small talk until her face hurt, acutely aware of Roran's constant presence at her side, his hand always touching her somewhere, her waist, her shoulder, her hand anchoring her. It was during one of these interactions that she noticed a commotion near the entrance. Raised voices, then a scream, and suddenly the entire atmosphere shifted. Vampires moved with supernatural speed, forming a protective wall around the dais, and Roran pushed Willa behind him. "What's happening?" she whispered. "Stay close to me," he ordered, his voice tight. The crowd parted and guards dragged forward a struggling vampire, Lord Draven, his face twisted with rage. In his hand was a knife that looked ancient and ceremonial, stained with something dark. "Traitor!" Draven shrieked. "You've betrayed our kind for a human whore. You've made us weak." "Draven Voss, you are under arrest for conspiracy and attempted assassination." Roran's voice was colder than ice. "Guards, take him to the dungeons." "Assassination?" Willa gasped. "The knife is poisoned with a substance lethal to vampires," one of the guards reported. "He was attempting to approach the dais when we intercepted him." Willa felt sick. Draven had tried to kill Roran. Because of her. "This is your fault!" Draven screamed at Willa as the guards hauled him away. "You've destroyed our king, turned him against his own people. When he tires of you, when you're dead and forgotten, he'll remember this betrayal." The doors slammed shut on his rant, and shocked silence filled the throne room. Roran turned to Willa, his face pale even by vampire standards. Are you all right? Me? He tried to kill you. Her voice came out shrill, and failed. I'm fine. He pulled her into his arms, uncaring of their audience. But you're shaking. Come on, let's get you somewhere quiet. He led her from the throne room, leaving Selene to manage the guests, and brought her to his private chambers. The moment the door closed behind them, Willa's legs gave out. Roran caught her, carrying her to the bed and settling her against the pillows. He could have killed you, she whispered, because of me. No, because of his own hate and greed. Roran sat beside her, his hands framing her face. Willa, listen to me. Draven has been a problem for centuries. He represents a faction that wants to return to the old ways, when vampires ruled through fear and humans were property. I've been avoiding dealing with him because it would cause political upheaval, but tonight he forced my hand. This has nothing to do with you. He called me a whore, she said, her voice breaking. He's a fool and a traitor, and his opinion means nothing. Roran pressed his forehead to hers. You are my consort, my chosen, the one I love. What he thinks, what anyone thinks, doesn't change that. I'm scared, Willa admitted. What if there are others like him? What if someone tries again? Then I'll deal with them the same way. I've lived 3,000 years, love. I've survived wars, plagues, assassination attempts too numerous to count. I'm not going anywhere. He kissed her gently. And neither are you. I won't let anyone take you from me. She believed him. Despite the fear still coursing through her veins, despite the insanity of her situation, she believed him. This ancient, powerful being loved her and would move heaven and earth to protect her. And she loved him back with equal intensity. Take me to bed, she whispered against his lips. Not to sleep. I need to feel alive right now. I need you. Something blazed in his crimson eyes. Willa, are you sure? Tonight has been traumatic. I'm sure. I love you, Roran. I want this. I want you. The kiss that followed was incendiary. All the restraint he'd been showing burning away in the face of shared need and love and relief that they were both safe. His cool hands found the fastenings of her gown with practiced ease, and she helped him remove his own formal attire until they were skin to skin, immortal and mortal pressed together with nothing between them. He was exquisitely careful with her, mindful of his strength even in passion, and when they finally came together it felt like something sacred. Willa clung to him, feeling his cool skin against her warmth, hearing his words of love murmured in languages both ancient and modern. This being had lived for 3,000 years, had seen empires rise and fall, and he chose her, loved her, wanted her. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Willa's head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. She felt boneless and safe, and loved in a way she'd never imagined possible after her world had fallen apart. I would like to make a request, Roran said quietly. Anything? Let me feed from you. Not tonight, he added quickly. But soon. I want that connection with you, that intimacy. Only if you want it too. Willa lifted her head to look at him. Will it hurt? The opposite. I'll make sure of it. His thumb traced her jaw. It will bond us more deeply. Let me feel your emotions, your essence, and you'll feel mine. It's the ultimate act of trust between vampire and human. Then yes, she whispered. I trust you completely. His smile was radiant. Tomorrow, then. Tonight, just let me hold you. They fell asleep wrapped around each other as dawn began to break outside, the specialized windows filtering the sunlight to something Roran could tolerate. Willa had never felt safer or more loved. The next evening, after Roran had dealt with the fallout from Draven's attempted assassination, he was sentenced to imprisonment in the deepest dungeons, his territory stripped, his house disgraced. He came to find Willa in the gardens. Are you still willing? He asked without preamble. She knew immediately what he meant. Yes. He led her back to his chambers, settling her on the bed. The look in his eyes was intense, hungry, but also tender. If at any point you want me to stop, just say the word. Your comfort is paramount. I trust you, Willa said again, and meant it. He sat beside her, drawing her into his arms so her back rested against his chest. His cool fingers tilted her head to the side, exposing her throat, and she felt him press a kiss there. Then another. Then the scrape of fangs that sent shivers racing through her entire body. The first bite was sharp, a brief flash of pain, and then it dissolved into sensation unlike anything she had ever experienced. Pleasure rolled through her in waves, warm and intoxicating, and she felt Roran's presence in her mind, his emotions tangling with hers. Love, desire, reverence, awe. He felt all of it for her, and she could sense it as clearly as her own feelings. And underneath it all was his immortality, the vast weight of 3,000 years, the loneliness that had defined so much of his existence until she'd stumbled into his life. She felt his joy at finding her, his terror of losing her, his determination to make her happy for however long they had together. When he finally pulled away, sealing the wound with a brush of his tongue, they were both shaking. Willa turned in his arms, finding his eyes blazing and his face flushed with color from her blood. "I love you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the depth of what she felt. "And I love you," he replied, "more than I thought possible after all these years. You've given me back my heart, Willa Emerson." The following months were the happiest of Willa's life. She settled into her role as consort, working alongside Roran to implement progressive policies that protected both humans and vampires. The court gradually accepted her, especially as they saw how devoted their king was and how hard she worked for the good of all people. There were still challenges. Factions that disagreed with their policies, vampires who thought humans inferior, humans who distrusted vampires. But Willa and Roran faced them together, a united front, and slowly but surely, things changed for the better. Willa continued her work cataloging Roran's art collection, eventually opening portions of the palace as a museum accessible to both humans and vampires. It became a symbol of the new era they were building, where both species could coexist peacefully and appreciate beauty together. They traveled too. Roran showed her the world he'd seen change, took her to ancient sites and modern cities, introduced her to vampires and humans who were working toward the same goals of equality and justice. Willa felt like she was part of something bigger than herself, and it was exhilarating. A year after the night they'd met, on the anniversary of that fateful auction, Roran brought her back to the gardens where they'd first really talked. "I have something to ask you," he said, and there was a nervousness in his voice she'd never heard before. "What is it?" He took her hands, his crimson eyes holding hers. "This year with you has been the best of my entire 3,000 years of existence. You've made me laugh, challenged me, supported me, loved me despite everything I am. I know we're already bound as king and consort, but I want more." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a ring that took her breath away, a perfect diamond surrounded by sapphires. "Willa Emerson, will you marry me? Not just in vampire tradition, but in human tradition too. Will you be my wife as well as my consort?" Tears streamed down Willa's face. Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and passionate. When they broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "I love you," Willa said, "and I've been thinking about what we discussed, about transformation." Roran's expression grew serious. "Have you made a decision?" "Not yet, but I want you to know I'm considering it seriously. The idea of spending eternity with you, of seeing the future you'll build, of never having to leave you," she touched his face. "It's becoming more appealing. But I want a few more years of humanity first, to experience certain things while I'm still mortal. Whatever you decide, whenever you decide it, I'll support you," he promised. "There's no rush. We have time." They were married 3 months later in a ceremony that blended vampire and human traditions, attended by beings from across the world. Willa wore a gown of white silk embroidered with silver thread, and Roran looked like a fairy tale prince in formal white and silver. They exchanged vows that made more than a few attendees cry, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever time they were given. The celebration lasted 3 days, as was vampire custom, and by the end of it, Willa was exhausted, but deliriously happy. She was Queen Willa now, wife to the vampire king, and the weight of that title no longer frightened her. With Roran at her side, she could face anything. 5 years passed in what felt like moments. Willa threw herself into her work, expanding the museum, creating cultural exchange programs between humans and vampires, advocating for policies that protected the vulnerable of both species. She and Roran were partners in every sense of the word, ruling together with wisdom and compassion. She aged, as humans do, while Roran remained eternally unchanged. But he kept his promise, treasuring every day with her, never making her feel less beautiful, as tiny lines began to appear at the corners of her eyes or the first strands of silver threaded through her brown hair. It was on their 5th anniversary that Willa finally made her decision. "I want to be turned," she told Roran as they lay in bed together. "I want forever with you. I want to see the world you'll build, to be part of it for centuries to come. I'm ready." He searched her face. "You're absolutely certain? There's no going back once it's done." "I'm certain. I've had 5 wonderful years as a human. I've experienced everything I wanted to experience. Now I want the future with you," she smiled. "Turn me, Roran. Make me your vampire queen in truth." The transformation was scheduled for the next full moon, as was tradition. Roran explained the process carefully. He would drain her to the point of death, then feed her his own ancient blood. The transformation would take 3 days, during which she would be unconscious and her body would remake itself from human to vampire. It would be painful, he warned, but he would be with her every moment. When the night came, Willa was calm. Roran laid her on their bed, surrounding her with candles and roses, making it as beautiful as possible. He held her close as he drank from her wrist, his eyes never leaving hers, letting her feel his love through their bond. As darkness began to claim her, she felt his wrist at her lips. "Drink," he commanded softly, and she did, tasting his blood for the first time. It was strange, cold and thick and tinged with power that made her entire body tingle. "Sleep now," Roran whispered as her eyes drifted closed, "and when you wake, we'll have eternity." The 3 days passed in a haze of pain and fever dreams. Willa was vaguely aware of Roran's presence, his cool hand holding hers, his voice murmuring words of love and encouragement. Her body felt like it was burning from the inside out, every cell remaking itself, and she wanted to scream but couldn't find her voice. Then, finally, the pain receded. Willa opened her eyes to find Roran leaning over her, his face anxious. But what struck her immediately was how different everything looked. Colors were more vivid, sounds sharper, and she could hear his breathing, the rustle of fabric, the distant sounds of the palace with perfect clarity. "Roran?" Her voice sounded different, more musical. "I'm here. How do you feel?" Willa sat up, and the movement was effortless in a way it never had been before. She looked down at her hands and saw skin pale as moonlight, nails strong and pearlescent. Her hair, when she pulled it forward, had turned pure white like spun silver. "It worked," she breathed. "I'm a vampire." Roran produced a mirror, and Willa stared at her reflection. The basic structure of her face was the same, but refined, perfected. Her eyes blazed crimson, and when she smiled, she saw delicate fangs. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, no longer quite human, but something more. "You're magnificent," Roran said, and the awe in his voice made her turn to him. "How do you feel?" "Strong, powerful, and hungry." She could smell blood, his blood, and the scent made her mouth water. "Roran, I'm so hungry." "I know. I have blood prepared for you." He helped her stand, and she was surprised by how steady she felt despite being newly transformed. "The first few weeks will be an adjustment. Your senses will be overwhelming, your strength difficult to control. But I'll teach you everything you need to know." He did. Over the following weeks, Roran patiently trained her in controlling her new abilities, the supernatural speed and strength, the enhanced senses, the need for blood. Willa proved an excellent student, mastering her new nature with determination, and the bond between them grew even stronger. Now they could speak mind to mind, share thoughts and emotions with perfect clarity. When they made love, it was transcendent, 2 immortal beings moving together with passion that would never fade. Willa's official coronation as Vampire Queen came a month after her transformation. She stood before the court in a gown of silver and white, her crimson eyes meeting the gazes of the assembled vampires without flinching. This was her people now, and she would rule them alongside Roran with wisdom and compassion. My people, Roran said, his hand clasping hers, I present to you your queen, Willa Kervaine, transformed and crowned. She is my equal in all things, my partner in rule, and my eternal love. Honor her as you honor me. The court bowed, and this time there was genuine respect in their gestures. Willa had earned her place through 5 years of dedicated work and unwavering integrity. Now, as an immortal, she would continue that work for centuries to come. Years turned to decades, then centuries. Willa and Roran ruled together, transforming vampire society into something better, more just. They protected humans and vampires alike, promoting coexistence and mutual respect. The world changed around them, but they remained constant, an unshakable partnership built on love and shared purpose. Willa never regretted her choice to be transformed. She'd been given forever with the being she loved, and every day, even after centuries, she found new reasons to be grateful for that night at the auction, when Roran had lifted her down in one motion and changed the course of both their lives. They traveled the world, saw wonders beyond imagination, met beings both mortal and immortal who enriched their lives. But always, they came back to each other, to the palace that was their home, to the love that had started with a trembling girl on an auction block and a lonely king who'd forgotten how to care. Now, 300 years after that first meeting, they stood together in the gardens where they'd fallen in love, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Do you ever miss it? Roran asked quietly. Your humanity? Willa considered this, then shook her head. I miss certain people, certain experiences, but I don't regret the choice I made. Every day with you has been a gift, and I wouldn't trade eternity with you for anything. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. You saved me, you know. When I saw you on that platform, something in me recognized that my existence had become meaningless. You gave me purpose again, reminded me what it meant to truly live rather than just exist. You'll never know how grateful I am that I walked into that auction house that night. Oh, I think I have some idea. Willa turned in his arms, her crimson eyes meeting his. Because you saved me too. From a fate I couldn't even imagine, from losing hope entirely. You gave me love, partnership, a life beyond anything I could have dreamed. We saved each other, Roran. That's what makes this work. He smiled, and after 3 centuries together, that smile still made her heart race. To 300 more years? To 3,000 more, Willa corrected, standing on her toes to kiss him. To forever. Around them, the garden bloomed eternal, a sanctuary they'd built together. Inside the palace, their people, vampire and human alike, lived in peace, protected by the laws they'd written and the example they'd set. The world they'd dreamed of creating that first night was real now, imperfect, but constantly improving. And through it all, Willa and Roran stood together, vampire king and queen, partners and lovers, bound by choice and love and an eternal promise. The girl who'd stood shaking on an auction block and the immortal who'd lifted her down had built something beautiful from darkness, a love that would truly last forever, and a world that was better for their presence in it. Their story had begun with fear and desperation, but it had transformed into something luminous and enduring. Every ending was really a beginning. Every obstacle overcome made them stronger together. And as they stood in their garden, surrounded by 3 centuries of memories and facing an infinite future, they knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges came, they would face them side by side. Because some loves transcend mortality. Some bonds are forged strong enough to last millennia. And sometimes, on the worst night of your life, the best thing possible walks through the door and changes everything. Willa had learned that truth 300 years ago, and it remained as vital now as it had been then. She was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with, for exactly as long as forever would last, and that, truly, was the happiest of endings.